All right, what I hope to talk to you about today is kind of real life experiences. I work for KPMG. I'm part of a smaller company that was taken over in 2011, Xantis. We're 130 strong. I work in a 300 strong sort of technology conehead part of KPMG, which doesn't give tax or audit advice, so don't ask me for any of that. KPMG is 11,000 in the UK, 3,000 in management consulting, so reasonably big. I've done everything from embedded systems and fuel gauging from A320, which is I think about as far away as you can get from cloud, through to running my own software house. So practical experience, I've seen a few silver bullets come along before. My role really with large clients is to be a cynical evangelist for new technology. So I actually think there's a lot of strengths in cloud, but I think there's a lot of practical experiences out that people need to know where the gotchas are. So hopefully I'll present you with some of the logical and physical gotchas that will give you something to think about in your organization. This is the standard model. There's a number of versions out there. We use this one. It's a kind of 3x3 matrix with a bit at the back. Basically, all the stuff over on the right-hand side is IT generic. So email, all of the stuff that you would expect to see in any organization, but also outside of an organization. The stuff in the middle is what we call business generic. So that's HR, payroll, finance. All the stuff an organization has to do to trade, but actually it doesn't add value to that organization as an entity. It doesn't distinguish it in the marketplace. And the stuff on the left is the critical line of business systems. Top to bottom, the stuff that's used by group or core or everyone within that organization. In the middle is stuff that's used by parts of the organization, large parts. That could be a strategic business unit, it could be a country. And at the bottom, the stuff that's used by a very specific part of that organization for a very specific purpose. And then around all of that, there's a 10th item which often gets forgotten, which is integration. So when you think about a large enterprise, and some of the companies we talk to are 130,000 strong, $1 billion I spent on IT, understanding logically how that company's IT splits across those areas is actually quite an important part of any IT project, but also cloud. The strategic drivers are different in each part of those. If you're going up to the top right-hand corner, centralize, standardize, get rid of complexity makes absolute strength. If you're down in the bottom left-hand corner, that's actually the core stuff in a specific company or country that makes you different. So standardizing, centralizing that might not be the best play. I'll bear this in mind because I'll come back to it at the end when we start to talk about cloud and how that fits. That's the kind of logical model. There are the not so magnificent 7 things that kind of stop clients doing cloud. So what we often do with clients is we'll try to map the logical aspects, and then on an item that looks good to fit with cloud, usually up on the top right, we'll then start to look at, for that item to take it to the cloud, how sensitive is it to each of these 7 items? And if it's sensitive to all of them, then you probably don't want to do public cloud. If it's sensitive to 1 or 2 of them and you can have mitigation, then it works. Some of this is quite technical. I won't get into the detail. My email address is at the end if anyone wants to talk to me about it, but I'll go through them as quickly as I can and let everyone get away. So, data security. There's 2 aspects to that. There's a governance aspect and there's the security model aspect. Governance aspect 1 really is in central government in the US and the UK. This is actually one where government can actually beat private sector. So in the US, the US federal government's come out with security standards that are acceptable for local and central government, and both Google and Microsoft have developed pseudo-public cloud environments for those clients. That's also happening in the UK, and that's very easy. If you take the FSA approach to retail finance, all they've said is, we don't have any standards. If you want to put anything to the cloud, it has to be tested and reviewed by a third party, and you have to have a paper saying whether it's allowed to go out or not. So it's basically saying every case is individual. That's great for consultancies, not so good for clients, and not so good for cloud providers because they don't know what the standards are that they have to meet that industry sector. The other bit is the security model. The old model used to be, I'd say this is a Roman Empire model, which is secure the perimeter. Trust the network, we'll secure the perimeter and we can trust everything that's inside the network. Doesn't work anymore. What makes an enterprise is different now. You've got third parties, you've got relationships, you've got associates, you bring in consultants. The perimeter is ill-defined, and also the range of technologies that you have around all aspects of the perimeter are vast in a large organization, and you're always attacked on the weakest point of that perimeter. So that model doesn't work. We're moving more towards a kind of onion layer, which is all the core data is being retrenched back to the data center. Secure links to third-party devices. If you've got an iPhone or an Android device, there's either no persistent data on that device, or if the data is persistent on that device, it's encrypted. And you have a certificate-based authentication process that allows you to do that. When the certificate's revoked, the device can't access that data. That's a great model, and it works. It's not a technology issue of can we do it. The problem is everybody's in the old model, and we all need to be in the new model to make cloud work, particularly with BYOD and stuff like that. Latency, speed of light. I love it when you get down to physics. It is an issue. It's an issue in two aspects. User to compute, that's how far away is the user from the processing power. And compute to data, how far away is the data from the processing power. If you sign up with a public cloud provider on a standard T's and C's, your compute might start off in the UK, but they could switch it to North America to invoke a service thing in the data center in the UK. If your users and your data are in the UK and your compute's in the US, you are going to experience a drop in performance at that point in time. You users will notice it, unless you design the application for that. The other bit is just the physics of moving large amounts of data. Cloud talks about being able to seamlessly move data between data centers or be able to move compute. You can move compute instantaneously. If you do the maths on how long it takes to move a terabyte of data over gigabit Ethernet links, you can't move the data that fast. So the issue between how far your compute is from your data is very important. Application design. This is probably the biggest one facing large legacy organizations. The applications that most companies have got, and this just isn't private companies, this is companies like SAP, Microsoft, etc., are large monolithic applications that were designed for a model where the compute, the data, and the user were all very close to each other. And the application did everything from top to bottom. And in many respects, the application was a proxy for security. Your logon rights to the application gave you your rights to the data. That model doesn't work so well in the cloud basis, where everybody's talking about the growth in APIs that we've been talked about, almost exponential. So if you've got 8,000 APIs and you're integrating to all of those, the application needs to be deconstructed. This is the biggest issue, as I say. Microsoft, SAP are spending a fortune on this to deconstruct their applications to make them work better in Office 365 and on the cloud. But also large corporates, going to your CIO and saying, have I got a business case for you? We're going to spend X squillion pounds on rewriting the application that currently gives the same functionality to the users, and we're going to put it in the cloud. It doesn't go down very well. So, but if we're going to take advantage of some of these economies of scale and some of these price points, that's what we've got to do. So we've got to be creative in that, because there's some really good price savings out there. Data knowledge. This is the biggest piece of fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's in most organizations. Many organizations, I'm sure all your organizations are different, by the way, so I'm not going to ask anybody to fess up here, but many organizations do not understand where all of their data sits. If you do not sit in a compliance regime, you probably only know where a fraction of your data is. Full implement lifecycle management is a dream of most CIOs to have at some point in the future. Again, very costly. The impact of that is it leads to a lot of uncertainty. If you're going to put stuff in the public cloud, the application I know about, but what data goes with that application? What's the risks around that data? How am I going to secure it? So cloud tends to kick up a load of kind of inward navel seeking to try and work out just what's happening in data. So full understanding of data is quite useful in this situation. Service integration. There's stats there to show, I think it was 66% were running private public cloud, more than one cloud provider. You've also got your traditional infrastructure. You've got to integrate that all together. Dual running costs a fortune. If all you do is put new stuff in the cloud and don't switch off any old stuff, the new stuff is a lot cheaper, but you've still got all the old costs. So all you've done is increase the overall cost of your IT estate. You've got to be augmenting some of your existing costs, replacing systems or cost avoidance going forward, and you've got to integrate it. So stuff like Office 365, if you're going to integrate that into your own MPLS cloud, you've got to put some big links to Microsoft site if you're going to get the performance on that. Those sorts of things aren't really thought through in a lot of cloud analysis to start with, and usually come as a shock. VDI, stuff like that, can fix a lot of problems, but it also is not a cheap way of doing things. So beware of that. And also, in a cloud situation, you're going to multi-vendor, software as a service, platform as a service, and your own traditional IT providers. How much of an integration are your users going to require? Do they want one service number to call? Or are you going to rely on, if they have a problem with Salesforce.com, they'll know to call Salesforce.com, they won't phone your help desk, and they're happy with that. That's probably the way most users will be, but a lot of IT organizations are struggling with how they're going to integrate this as a service proposition to a single party. Contract alignment, this is a great one. The three models, if you look at kind of old school, was the strategic relation. Anybody who's old enough to remember when consultants were going around, you know, you want one butt to kick, you want a strategic partner, they've got to manage all your IT infrastructure with you, it'll be fantastic. And now we're going around telling you maybe that model doesn't work so well. I'm not suggesting I was one of the people that was doing that at the time. I might have been, I'm not denying it or admitting to it. In that relationship, there was a kind of balance of power there. You had a relationship with the client had a relationship with you. The contract was in one jurisdiction. Everybody knew what the rules are. They might not like the contract, but everybody knew what that contract was and knew what the legalities of that contract are. We've now moved to the multi-source model, or right source, which is you or one of your partners is the service integrator, and you have a load of right sourcing with a load of multiple parties. And in that model, really, the power relationship moves to you, because you're managing a load of smaller relationships, and you're doing all of those, and you can coordinate those in multiple contracts with a master service agreement under a single jurisdiction. Go to the cloud future. If you go to Amazon or Google and ask them to sign your terms and contracts, you're going to have a long wait. Most of these organizations won't even sign an NDA with you to discuss whether they want to do a contract with you. They've got the standard T's and C's, and the choices are take it or leave it. There is some room within that, but the power sits there. You've got multiple jurisdictions, multiple contracts with multiple providers, multiple service levels, all of that, and you have no control or ability to affect those. You can't audit them. They'll have a single audit done, and you'll have to take the results of that audit. Completely switches the relationship, and the model going forward is a mix really between multi-source and cloud source for most of the complex providers who've got traditional IT relationships in the middle one, and they've got the cloud stuff. So the lawyers are having a field day with that, and lots of legal advice and lots of legal cost. Technology lock-in, is it an issue? The answer is it varies. So if you're going for private cloud infrastructure as a service, the technology lock-in is very low there, because you're going to make a decision on Hyper-V or VMware and the storage solution. You might go vBlock, whatever. But basically, you're going to put your own operating systems on there. You're going to put your own data on there. You're going to manage your own applications on there. A party's going to be doing it, and you're in control of your own destiny. Provided you can find somebody else that supports VMware, Hyper-V, vBlock, you're fine. There's no issue. Start to go to software as a service in the public cloud, which is at the other end of the dimension, then that's quite serious. If your data is with Salesforce.com, you may well have the rights to have that data backed up, but that data is not going to be a lot of use if you don't have an application called Salesforce.com that runs it for you or something very similar. So there's a broad spectrum, and you've got to understand what the specifics of the cloud are and the specifics of your data before you worry about whether you're locked in or not. It's a standards issue, but really, until somebody can produce the same functionality you were getting from the old application with your data, having the data from a software as a service provider isn't really it's good to have it, but if the software provider decides not to trade with you or decides to triple the contractual premium on that contract for you, you don't have an alternative to run that data on at that point in time. So coming back to where does this all mean? So what this means is some things within cloud fit better than others in some of those areas. So coming back to that 3x3 matrix, stuff like software as a service, Office 365, Workday, Salesforce.com, they fit very well up in that top right-hand corner. If you come into things like you want to do something slightly less specific, but it's still common service, then platform as a service works well, and down at infrastructure as a service level, you get a lot more flexibility to do what you want. But when you come across to the left-hand side of things, doing that in the public cloud starts to become quite hard. If I was advising a retail bank on where to put their banking system, I probably wouldn't be telling them to put it in Amazon or Google anytime soon. However, financial service organizations are using Office 365 and Google Apps for email. So it's not one, the cloud isn't one thing, the enterprise isn't one thing. There are bits that fit better than others, so just understand that. What do you do with the difficult stuff? You steal with pride, I think is the term I would use. If you take the technologies that these guys are using out in their data centers and put them in your data centers, you can get very similar numbers. Everybody talks about cloud, it's about economies of scale. Yeah, Google are bigger and they can buy stuff cheaper than you, Amazon certainly can, but it's also about utilization. It's a bit like a hotel. They've got an occupancy rate and they've got to cover for that occupancy rate when they sell their services on. If you know you've got a fixed requirement for a certain capacity for 3 to 5 years, and you build that infrastructure or have a partner build it for you using cloud technology, you can get a lot of savings. The one on the right was a global client wanted to virtualize more than 300 servers. The difference between putting that on Amazon and Google or putting it in a third-party data center with Hyper-V or VMware, it was 75% of the savings from their existing large contract with a single supplier. They got 75% cost out just by moving it into another supplier using cloud technology. If they'd moved it to Amazon or to Google, they would get an extra 5% saving on a 3-year lock-in. So actually, they can get all of the benefits, or the cost benefits, but have all of the security that they want from having this stuff in their own data center. Love the one, it's a UK one. I like to sort of put those bits up. Arm in Cambridge, one of the success stories in the UK, they built a 2 megawatt data center. 2 megawatts to Google is like a fraction of one hall. It doesn't even score. That was designed by a British company in Nottingham called 2BM. I have no relationship with any of these companies, I just think it's great that it's British. And they built that data center in 3 months, and they gave it a PUE of 1.08. That's the power efficiency. Google's best PUE in February was 1.08, and their average was 1.12. So they've built, in the UK, using cloud technology, a data center that's as cost efficient from an energy point of view as Google can do, and they've done that just now. So if you know what your demand is and it's fixed for 3 to 5 years, you can get a lot of the benefits of cloud by doing the stuff yourself, but just taking those technologies and using it in-house. It's a guy called Joe Weinman. He's got a website called Cloudonomics. I do recommend that if you've got some time to spare. He's done a lot of analysis and occupancy rates and stuff like that, and it's very good. I'd recommend that. I think that's me finished, and I'll sit down quickly and then let any questions in. We can all go off home. Thanks very much.